All right, guys. So for this activity, we're going to be really looking at and exploring the ideas of blend modes and layer styles. So blend modes you're going to access from your layers panel. Right here, I don't have an image up yet, but where my mouse is, you can see the word is kind of light gray right now because there's nothing there, but it says normal. So that is the default blend mode for all of your layers. If I were to have an image in here loaded right now, I could click on that and it would give me a drop down of a bunch of different options. I'm going to show you online. There's this great website. I will link it to your My Learning that breaks down all the different blend modes for you. So it can be quite confusing because it's a lot of math. People don't usually think there's math in art, but there is. So you have to think about all the algorithms that went together that someone input into Photoshop to build the program. So this website breaks down every single blend mode for you. You can read about it. You can see different examples, how the colors affect each other, how your different layers would be blended together if you applied that blend mode. We will also be looking at the idea of layer style. So on every single layer, if you were to double click it, this little dialog box would pop up and you have all of these options on the left-hand side that you can select and you can manipulate. You get sliders for each one, you get different options, and you can customize your layers and you can add different things to them. So we're going to be making a neon portrait, or we're going to be working with an image of a portrait, and we're going to put some neon shapes and bars around the person and work with these two concepts here so you can get some practice with them. So the first thing that I want you guys to do is to go and find a full body image on Google. Make sure that it's a high quality picture. We don't want it to be super pixelated. Mine isn't huge right now. You can see the size 800 by 566. And then I ended up cropping that image down, or I will. I've practiced with it already. But I'm going to save it, and I'm going to bring that into Photoshop. So I'm going to go File, Open. I'm going to find the image, open it here, and then I'm going to crop it down because I just want to work with one half of it. Okay, so if I zoomed way in, you can see it is kind of pixelated, but it's just a practice picture, so it's all right. So now that we have our image here, we can't change the blend mode yet because there's nothing to blend together. We only have one layer right now. So in order to access the blend modes, you have to have multiple layers to work together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here to my tools panel and I'm going to select my rectangle tool. You've got all these different shapes, so you can work with any of them. I just want to work with my rectangle. And I'm going to draw out a box over her. So then in my properties panel, if that doesn't pop open for you, remember it's a different window or a panel that you can access by coming up here to window. So if you don't see it, make sure properties is selected and this would pop up for you. But what I want is just like a white bar that goes around. So I don't want this rectangle to be filled with black. So I'm going to double click on fill. And I want to select this white square right here with the red line going through it. That means that there is no fill, no color. So I'm going to select that. And then I want my stroke, which is just a line around the edge, to be white. All right. Then I can change how many pixels it is. So I'm going to set mine to 5. So I'm going to click 5, hit enter. And you can see that it increased the thickness of that line. So your stroke is literally just like color or thickness of a line. And we want white, and you can play around with the number. You cannot play around with the color right now. For this particular tutorial, I want you guys to stick with white, but you can play around with how thick the line is. 5 pixels just works for my image. Then what I want to do is mess around with my corners. So I have some different options here. I can round off my corners. I can set it to round corners. I can set it to harsh, like pointed corners. And then if I come inside and I look here, there's some little dots on the inside of my stroke. And if I click that and pull it towards the center a little bit more, it starts to round it off. So those are my corner widgets. So I just want to pull those in just slightly. And then the last thing I'm going to do is to make this a little bit more dynamic, I want to rotate the shape that I've created and decide where it's placed. So I can move it around now by getting my move tool. I'm going to click right on the white. And I want this to look like I want to be able to see it through her arm, that open gap right there. So I like where it's placed now. If I wanted to change the size, I could. But you want to make sure for this particular tutorial, because we're going to end up working with some layer masks like we've done in the past, you want to make sure that you get this sized and placed where you want first before you start working with the mask. Okay, so I'm happy with this. So now what I'm going to do is, I don't need the properties anymore, so I'm going to close that. This is where we're going to get into our layer style. So if you notice though, normal, my blend mode, is able to be clicked on. I get all those little drop downs there. And that's because I've got multiple layers now that could be blended together. Right now I'm just going to leave it as normal. Okay. What I want to do on my rectangle layer, this is where we're going to create those neon bars, is to double click it. And my layer style options pop up for me. The one we're going to be working with today is the outer glow. So you want to click on the checkbox, but also make sure that you have double clicked onto the actual words, because the options over here will change. Now you can see that it says outer glow now over on the right hand side, and I get all of these different options for myself. I can change the color, I can once again change the blend mode here, I can change the quality, the elements, all sorts of things. So you're going to decide what color you want your neon bar to be. Right now mine's set to blue. If I wanted this to be pink or red or yellow, I can change it up to whatever I wanted. And I'm just going to say okay right there. We're going to start off with the screen blend mode. Now, if I wanted to see what each of these would do, I could click on every single one of them. And you can see how they change. They've kind of broken down into sections for you. You can see these little lines in between. So these are going to essentially affect the darker colors differently and how the two layers are blended together. This chunk right here affects the lighter colors differently, and so on and so forth. But it's great to just experiment with these. Well, for this tutorial, we're going to work with screen. But I encourage you guys to go through and just see how they all look different. Screen seems to give the most realistic neon glow. So we can mess around with that. I can also change my opacity here. If I wanted less color, I can turn it down. If I wanted more color, I could crank it up. Mine's set to 56. You can set yours at whatever number you like, what you feel looks best. Noise, this is going to be like grain. It's how many little dots you see. So I like for this tutorial just to keep it down to 0. We don't want to see a lot of noise there. We want it to be very soft and glowing. The spread, again, you can mess around with. I like to keep it right around 20 or so, but it works differently on every single picture. So you have some options. You'll also see a little preview right here where you can test out how it looks, or you can just look on your image over to the right. And then if we clicked on the contour, we can play around with this drop down of the preset. Currently it's on linear. Some of the other ones that might work for this, well, I'm just going to click on some so you guys can see. Yeah, that doesn't really look like a true neon glow anymore. It has some different effects. but I found that other ones that work well are, let me see, I think it was the rounded steps. That one's not too bad. But again, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to go with linear for right now. You can play around with it to see what you like. And then test out these different sliders under that contour, the range and the jitter as well. See what happens. So once I'm happy with this, then I can say okay. And I can see that my layer style effects is now underneath my rectangle layer. The next step that we want to do to make it look like the bar is actually going around her and not just floating in space in front is to place on a layer mask. So you guys have done those in class already. The layer mask icon is down at the bottom of your layers panel. I can click on this. And remember, white reveals, black conceals. So it's currently all white, which means that the entire rectangle and that glow is showing everywhere on my image, but I don't want it to be. I want to mask off some parts to make it look like it's going behind her, like I said. So I'm going to get my brush tool. I can click on it on the tools panel, or I can just hit B for my keyboard shortcut. I want to make sure that black is set for my foreground color over here on the color panel. Remember that these two little squares right above your color panel are always going to be black and white. So it's the default there. If I had some random color sitting, I don't have to double click it and open it up and move my slider over to the corners. Yeah, that takes too long. I can simply just click on the little tiny squares and it sets it to black and white for me. Then to flip them around, I can either click on these arrows or I can hit X on my keyboard and it will do the same thing. But I want black to be there because I'm going to conceal part of that bar. Right, so I'm going to zoom in here so I can see what I'm doing. I want to double check up here that everything is looking good for my brush. So I've got it on the normal blend mode. My opacity is 100%. These are some things that students often forget, and when they start painting or working with layer masks, they wonder why something's not working properly. Always double check this is how you want it set. And I want to make sure that I've got a hard edge brush, which I do, hard round. Okay, the hardness is 100%. The reason for that is because I've got some like very strong lines in here. I want to get it right to the edge. I don't want it to be soft and blurred. I want it to make it look like it's really going around. So I'm going to increase my brush size with my brackets a little bit. Then I'm going to just start painting it away. Remember, we're not erasing, we are just concealing. You can see where that black is painted onto my layer mask. And I'm going to come up to the shoulder. So now it looks like it's coming up and around her, going through her arm, that little arm gap, coming in front of her legs. If I wanted to make it go behind her hand, I could. And now if we zoom back out, now it looks like it's actually in that space. It's working in that environment. She's got this neon bar that's really going around her body. Doesn't look like it's just floating there in front of her. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to create your own organic shape. We don't necessarily have to use the shape tool. What I could do is apply a new layer, and I'm just going to turn this one off so it's invisible. So it doesn't confuse me right now. I'm just going to click the little eyeball. So I haven't deleted it, I've just made it invisible. Now I can add a brand new blank layer. And I'm going to get my brush tool. I want white, so I'm going to hit X on my keyboard so it flips those colors. Now, if I want to make this really nice and smooth, because I'm working on a laptop, so just a trackpad. And you guys will be working on the desktops with the mice, and oftentimes they're kind of difficult to work with. They're not as smooth as, say, like a tablet would be and an Apple Pencil. We don't have tablets for the desktops, so instead what you can do is you can change the smoothing of your brush. So if I wanted to have like a neon swirl going around her body right now, and actually I'm gonna set my pixels to 5 because I liked that when I was working with the other one. So changed my brush size to 5. And now what I can do is come around here. And if I started painting this swirl, again, I'm working with a trackpad, so you can see how my lines aren't very smooth. And they're a little janky. It's not looking great. If I wanted that to be smoothed out, I'm going to take that off by doing Command Z for undo. I can crank up my smoothing. Let's just try 50%. I can hit enter. And it's not perfect, but it's getting a lot better. Ooh, that one wasn't great. So if I wanted it to be even smoother, I could increase that number. So let's try 75%. And I would just play around with this until you like how it looks. Yeah, this is much nicer. Some of this we're still going to take away, just like we did with that layer mask before. All right, so I'm going to double click on my layer here. I'm going to go and add my outer glow. I'm going to change the color this time. Let's do a blue. All right, it has all my settings from before, so I'm just going to leave those the same. Now I can apply my layer mask and zoom in and really start deciding where I want to take it away. Okay, what line needs to be in front, what line would be coming behind her. So I'm going to pretend like it's starting from this point right here. So I want black as my foreground color. I'm painting on my layer mask. Let's increase that brush size a little bit, it goes a little faster. And I'm just going to be real careful right there and come right to the edges of the hair. So it's hard to see it in this section because of that blend mode. We're working with screen on our layer style. So because the original image, that background picture, is very light colored over on top of the window, plus the white and that blue for the glow, for the neon, the way that blend mode works together, it's kind of difficult to see, but that's okay. Okay, that's what would happen in real life. So I'm going to follow this line around. I want this one to go in front. It would go behind her shoulder right here. And if I mess up, remember, you can just hit Command Z for undo, or you can paint it back in with white. Because when we're working with a layer mask, you're not deleting permanently your information. You are revealing and concealing it. Clean that up. Trying to go real slow so I make really nice selections. And it would be coming down in front here, going behind. Go a little bit bigger. Speed it up some more. Make it smaller when I get to the edges. So I need to leave a little bit of white in that open gap, but then take some away on top of her arm. Oops. Okay, so right here, you can see I got rid of too much. So I'm just gonna hit X on my keyboard, flip it back to white, because I'm not actually painting with white. I'm just revealing those pixels again. And then go back to black, and I'm just gonna decrease my brush size just so I can get in this little tiny section and be really precise about it. There we go, that looks better. All right, I'd come down and around, go behind her leg here. So this helps to conceal some of those parts that weren't as smooth also. Get rid of that and then bring it back in with my white. Okay, comes down and around. Would go behind her knee. And down and around, and right behind her leg right here. And if I zoomed out, I've got what I like. And if I wanted to keep this consistent, actually, that line comes around the window right here, but I'm going to make this part actually go behind her head so it doesn't cover her eyes. And let's just get rid of it over here. We don't need it. All right, that looks better. Yeah. Now, if we turned on the other one, you can see them both at the same time. And remember, like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you've resized that bar, you've placed it where you wanted it to be before you start working with your layer masks. Because if I were to click on my rectangle now and try to move it, my little chunks that I've taken away, you can see over here on the wall, they wouldn't fit correctly anymore. All right, so I'm going to hit undo, Command Z, and now I've got my neon bars. So go ahead, have fun with this. Make sure that you are playing around with those blend modes and the layer styles and create some awesome work for me.